I'm Jessica Martinez, and I'm 38 years old. Last month, I discovered my family had been secretly planning to force me out of the restaurant empire I built from nothing, claiming they deserved equal ownership because family should share everything. The intervention they staged at my grandmother's 85th birthday party backfired spectacularly when I presented the legal documents they never expected to see. But before I tell you how I turned their greed against them, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and if this story of family betrayal and business protection resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happens when I reveal the real ownership structure of Martinez family restaurants will leave you speechless. Growing up in East Los Angeles, I learned early that family loyalty could be both a blessing and a curse. My grandmother Rosa Martinez had immigrated from Guadalajara with nothing but recipes and determination, eventually opening a small taqueria that became the heart of our neighborhood. By the time I was born, the restaurant was thriving, but the family dynamics around it were complicated. My father Miguel was Rosa's eldest son, and he managed the day-to-day operations with a combination of pride and resentment. He loved the restaurant but felt trapped by it, often drinking too much and complaining about customers, suppliers, and the endless demands of running a business. My mother Carmen worked as a server and cashier, her warm personality making her beloved by regular customers who came as much for her smile as for Rosa's food. I have two siblings, my older brother Carlos, who was always Rosa's favorite, and my younger sister Alina, who inherited our mother's beauty and charm. From my earliest memories, it was clear that Carlos was being groomed to take over the restaurant someday, despite showing little interest in actually working. He spent high school and college hanging around the restaurant, charming customers and learning to cook, but never dealing with inventory, payroll, or any of the difficult aspects of the business. Carlos has the personality for this, Rosa would say whenever I showed interest in learning the business side. You're too serious, Mija. You should focus on school and find a nice office job. This dismissal stung, but it also motivated me to prove her wrong. The pattern of favoritism intensified when I was 14 and Carlos was 17. During a particularly busy weekend, I noticed that our cash register totals didn't match our actual sales. When I mentioned this to my father, he brushed off my concerns, but I kept tracking the discrepancies. Eventually, I discovered that Carlos had been taking money from the register to fund his social life, confident that his status as the golden child would protect him from consequences. When I confronted him privately, Carlos laughed. "Family business means family money," he said casually. "Besides, I'll be running this place someday. Consider it an advance on my inheritance." His entitlement shocked me, but what hurt more was my family's reaction when I tried to address the theft. Rosa accused me of being jealous and divisive, while my parents suggested I was exaggerating the problem. That incident taught me two crucial lessons. First, that being family didn't guarantee integrity, and second, that I would need to protect any business success I achieved from relatives who felt entitled to benefit without contributing. I threw myself into my studies, determined to build something that couldn't be taken away through manipulation or family pressure. After graduating valedictorian from high school, I earned a full scholarship to UCLA, where I studied business administration with a focus on restaurant management and hospitality. I worked part-time at various restaurants throughout college, learning different cuisines, management styles, and operational systems. During summers, I returned to work at Rosa's Taqueria, but now I was documenting everything: recipes, supplier relationships, customer preferences, financial patterns. By my senior year, I had developed a comprehensive business plan for expanding the family restaurant into a small chain. My proposal included standardized operations, improved supplier contracts, marketing strategies, and financial projections showing how we could open 3 additional locations within 5 years. I presented this plan to my family during Christmas dinner, expecting enthusiasm and support. Instead, I was met with skepticism and dismissal. "You think you're so smart with your college degree," Rosa said coldly. "But you don't understand the restaurant business like Carlos does. He has the experience and the instincts." My father agreed, adding that my ideas were too complicated and would ruin the family atmosphere that made the restaurant special. Carlos, meanwhile, had dropped out of community college and was living at home, working sporadically at the restaurant when he felt like it. He had developed a serious drinking problem and had been arrested twice for drunk driving, but the family continued to treat him as the heir apparent. "Carlos just needs time to mature," my mother would say whenever his problems were mentioned. After graduation, I made the difficult decision to strike out on my own rather than continue fighting for recognition in a family business that would never value my contributions. Using my savings and a small business loan, I opened my first restaurant in Pasadena. Martina's Modern Mexican, a fast casual concept that combined traditional recipes with contemporary presentation and efficient operations. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days handling everything from cooking to cleaning to marketing. I lived in a studio apartment and ate ramen noodles when I wasn't testing new menu items. But my business background and relentless work ethic began to pay off. Within 6 months, I was turning a profit, and within a year, I had a waiting list for tables. The success attracted attention from food critics and investors, but it also drew commentary from my family. Rosa publicly criticized my pretentious presentation of traditional dishes, while Carlos made jokes about my fancy restaurant for white people. Their disapproval hurt, but it also reinforced my decision to build independently rather than trying to reform the family business. By age 30, I had opened 3 more locations and developed a catering division that served corporate events and private parties. Martinez Modern Mexican was featured in Los Angeles magazine as one of the city's best up-and-coming restaurant groups. I employed over 60 people, had relationships with local farms and suppliers, and was invited to speak at hospitality industry conferences. During this period, my relationship with my family remained strained but civil. I attended major family events and sent money when asked for specific emergencies, but I kept clear boundaries around my business operations. Carlos had finally been forced to take a more active role at Rosa's Taqueria after my father's minor heart attack, but his management style was chaotic and the restaurant's finances were suffering. 3 years ago, everything changed when I received an offer from a major restaurant corporation to purchase my 4 locations for $2.8 million. The offer was legitimate and generous, but after careful consideration, I decided to decline. My restaurants were more than just businesses, they were my life's work and a platform for supporting my community through jobs and local partnerships. However, word of the offer somehow reached my family, and suddenly their attitude toward me shifted dramatically. Rosa began calling me weekly, wanting to reconnect and hear about my business. Carlos started visiting my restaurants regularly, offering unsolicited advice and introducing himself to staff as my business partner. Elena, who had previously shown no interest in restaurants, began posting Instagram photos from my locations and referring to herself as part of the Martinez restaurant family. The requests for financial help escalated quickly. What had been occasional asks for a few $100s became regular demands for thousands. Rosa needed money for medical bills that insurance didn't cover. Carlos needed help with rent after being evicted from his apartment. Elena needed money for her wedding, her car repairs, her credit card debt. Each request came with emotional manipulation about family loyalty and my obligation to share my success. You wouldn't have anything without our family recipes. Rosa guilt tripped me during one particularly intense conversation. Everything you built came from what I taught you. The least you can do is help your family when we need it. The irony wasn't lost on me that these same family recipes had been available to Carlos for years, but he had never managed to turn them into anything approaching my level of success. 6 months ago, the requests became demands, and the demands became threats. During a family gathering, Carlos announced that he was planning to open his own restaurant using our family recipes and expected me to provide the startup capital. When I declined, he accused me of being selfish and forgetting my roots. Rosa supported him, suggesting that I owed it to the family to help Carlos succeed. Besides, Elena added with a calculated smile, you have 4 restaurants. You can afford to help Carlos open one. It's not like you need all that money just for yourself. The conversation revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of business ownership and their assumption that my success was somehow communal property available for redistribution according to their needs. The situation escalated 3 months ago when I discovered that Carlos had been telling people around the neighborhood that he was my business partner and co-owner of Martinez Modern Mexican. He had even created business cards identifying himself as Carlos Martinez, operations manager, and was giving them to suppliers and potential investors. When I confronted him about this misrepresentation, he brushed off my concerns. We're family, he said dismissively. What's the difference? Besides, I've been giving you advice and helping promote the restaurants. I deserve some credit for your success. His entitlement was breathtaking, but what worried me more was learning that he had approached my bank about accessing business accounts, claiming to be a partner with signing authority. That incident prompted me to conduct a thorough review of my business security and legal protections. Working with my attorney, I discovered several concerning patterns. Carlos had been collecting information about my operations, including supplier contracts and employee records. Elena had been asking my staff detailed questions about revenues and operational procedures. Even my parents had been making inquiries about my business structure and ownership arrangements. I hired a private investigator to document these activities, and discovered that my family had been developing a plan to claim ownership stakes in my restaurants based on their contributions to my culinary education and their ongoing consultation on menu development. They had actually met with an attorney about pursuing legal action to force me to recognize them as business partners. The most shocking discovery came when I learned that they had been actively approaching my investors and landlords, representing themselves as having ownership interests and suggesting that major business decisions required their approval. This interference was not only legally problematic, but was potentially damaging to my business relationships and reputation. Armed with this evidence, I realized that I needed to take decisive action to protect my business from family members who had convinced themselves that my success belonged to them. The upcoming family gathering for Rose's 85th birthday party would provide the perfect opportunity to address this situation publicly, with witnesses present to hear my response to their manipulations. The weeks leading up to Rose's birthday party were filled with increasing pressure from my family. Carlos had begun showing up at my restaurants during busy periods, acting as if he had authority to make decisions about staffing and operations. Elena was posting social media content that implied she was involved in running my businesses. My parents were calling regularly with suggestions about how I should expand my operations and share the profits more equitably with family members. "We've been thinking," my mother said during one particularly manipulative phone call, "that it would be fair for the family to have official roles in your restaurants. Carlos could be operations manager, Elena could handle marketing, and your father and I could be advisors. We're not asking for money, just recognition for our contributions and a voice in important decisions." The presumption in her statement was staggering. They wanted authority without responsibility, benefits without investment, and control over businesses they had never supported during the difficult early years. I decided that the birthday party would be the ideal setting to clarify the actual ownership structure of my companies and establish firm boundaries about family involvement. I spent 2 weeks preparing my presentation, working with my attorney to organize legal documents that would demonstrate my sole ownership of all business assets and intellectual property. I also compiled evidence of my family's recent interference and misrepresentations, including recordings of conversations where they claimed partnership roles and testimonials from employees who had been confused by conflicting instructions from Carlos. The night before the party, I received a call from Alina that confirmed my suspicions about their coordinated plan. "We're all so excited to celebrate Rosa tomorrow," she said sweetly, "and Carlos mentioned that you might have some exciting business announcements to share with the family. It would be wonderful if you could finally recognize all the support we've given you over the years." I assured her that I would indeed have some important announcements to make about the family's role in my business operations. What I didn't mention was that these announcements would be very different from what they were expecting. Rose's 85th birthday party was held at the community center where many of our family celebrations had taken place over the years. The familiar venue held memories of graduations, quinceañeras, and wedding receptions, making it the perfect setting for what I knew would be a pivotal family moment. As I arrived carrying a leather portfolio containing the documents that would reshape our family dynamics, I could smell the familiar aromas of Rose's cooking mixed with the industrial cleaning products that always lingered in the community center's kitchen. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting warm light across the tables where 43 family members and friends had gathered to celebrate Rose's milestone birthday. Colorful papel picado hung from the ceiling, fluttering gently in the breeze from the overhead fans. The sound of children playing and adults catching up in rapid Spanish created a backdrop of normalcy that would soon be shattered. Rosa sat at the head table wearing her best dress, a royal blue outfit she had saved for special occasions, her gray hair perfectly styled and her eyes bright with pleasure at being surrounded by loved ones. To her right sat Carlos, looking confident and relaxed in a new button-down shirt, frequently leaning over to whisper in Rose's ear. Elena was working the room like a politician, her flowing sundress and charming smile drawing compliments from relatives who hadn't seen her in months. My parents flanked the other side of the head table, my father's polo shirt still crisp despite the warm afternoon, my mother wearing the pearl necklace I had given her last Christmas. They kept glancing toward the entrance, obviously expecting me to arrive with some kind of announcement about elevating the family's role in my business operations. I took my assigned seat at a side table with younger cousins and their partners, deliberately positioning myself where I could observe the room's reactions without being the immediate center of attention. My cousin Maria, a teacher who had always been supportive of my business success, gave me a warm hug and asked about my latest restaurant location. Her husband, David, an accountant who understood business structures, offered to help if I ever needed financial advice for expansion. As the meal progressed through Rosa's traditional mole poblano and handmade tortillas, I watched my immediate family members exchanging meaningful glances and subtle nods. They were clearly coordinating their approach, probably planning to pressure me into making announcements about business partnerships during the traditional birthday speech period. Carlos stood first, tapping his beer bottle with a fork to get everyone's attention. The conversations gradually died down as family members turned toward the head table, expecting the usual round of affectionate birthday tributes and funny family stories. Before we sing to Rosa, Carlos began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he was about to achieve a major victory. I think it's important to recognize how our family's traditions and values have contributed to all of our successes. He gestured broadly around the room, his eyes settling on me with unmistakable expectation. Some of us have been blessed to build businesses that reflect the recipes, the work ethic, and the community spirit that Rosa taught us. He continued, his voice taking on the formal tone he used when he wanted to sound important. And I think it's time to officially acknowledge the family foundation that makes all of our achievements possible. Alina stood to join him, her smile radiant as she prepared to play her part in their coordinated presentation. Carlos is absolutely right, she said, her voice sweet but calculated. Family business means family success, and family success means family participation. We're all so proud of what Jessica has built, and we're ready to step up and help take the Martinez restaurant family to the next level. The room was completely quiet now, with everyone sensing that something significant was happening but not understanding the underlying tension. Rosa beamed with pleasure, clearly believing that her granddaughter was about to announce a family business merger that would elevate everyone's status and financial security. Jessica, my mother called out, her voice warm but commanding, would you like to share your thoughts about the family's role in your restaurant's future? This was the moment I had been preparing for. I stood slowly, retrieving my leather portfolio and walking to the front of the room where everyone could see me clearly. The community center's fluorescent lights cast sharp shadows across the assembled faces, highlighting expressions of anticipation, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed greed. I'm grateful for this opportunity to clarify the relationship between my family and my business operations. I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. There seems to be some confusion about ownership, partnerships, and decision-making authority that needs to be addressed publicly. I opened my portfolio and removed the first document, a corporate registration showing that Martinez Modern Mexican LLC was solely owned and operated by Jessica Martinez, with no other family members listed as partners, shareholders, or officers. These are the official business registration documents for my 4 restaurant locations, I announced, holding up the papers where everyone could see them. As you can see, I am the sole owner and operator of all Martinez Modern Mexican properties and operations. Carlos's confident expression flickered with uncertainty, but he quickly recovered. Well, of course you're the official owner, he said with a nervous laugh. But we're talking about recognizing family contributions and formalizing the advisory roles we've been playing. What advisory roles? I asked directly, removing a second set of documents from my portfolio. These are recordings and testimonials documenting recent incidents where family members have misrepresented their relationship to my businesses. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as I began reading specific examples. On March 15th, Carlos introduced himself to my produce supplier as operations manager and attempted to negotiate pricing changes without authorization. On April 3rd, Alina told a potential investor that she was responsible for marketing strategy and brand development. On April 20th, my parents contacted my landlord claiming to represent my interests in lease negotiations. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembled family members as the scope of the misrepresentations became clear. Rosa's face showed confusion and growing alarm, while several relatives turned to stare at Carlos and Alina with obvious disapproval. That's not what we meant, Alina stammered, her composure cracking as she realized their plan was falling apart. We were just trying to help and support the family business. It's not a family business, I said firmly, my voice cutting through her protests. It's my business built with my education, my investment, my labor, and my risk. I have never had business partners, advisors, or co-owners from this family. My father stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Jessica, this is inappropriate, he declared, his voice rising. You're humiliating your family over technicalities. We raised you, supported you, taught you everything you know about restaurants. Did you? I challenged, pulling out financial records showing my student loans, business startup costs, and early operating expenses. These documents show that I funded my own education, secured my own business loans, and invested my own savings to open my first restaurant. I received no financial support from this family for my business ventures. The evidence was undeniable, and the room was now buzzing with shocked conversations as extended family members processed the revelations. Rosa's sister Carmen, a sharp-eyed woman who had always been skeptical of get-rich-quick schemes, stood up from her table. "Wait a minute," Carmen called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Are you saying that Carlos and Alina have been lying about being business partners?" Because Carlos told my husband that he was co-owner and was looking for investors for expansion. This revelation triggered an avalanche of similar stories from other family members. Cousin Miguel mentioned that Carlos had approached him about investing in the family restaurant business. Tia Sofia revealed that Alina had asked for a loan to help with business expenses. Uncle Roberto admitted that he had been considering putting money into what he thought was a family partnership. "How many people have you approached claiming to represent my business interests?" I demanded, staring directly at Carlos, whose face had gone pale as the extent of his deception became public. It's not like that," Carlos stammered, looking desperately between Rosa and my parents for support. "We're family." "Family helps family. I thought you'd want us to help with expansion and investment opportunities." "By lying about ownership and authority," I pressed. "By creating business cards with fake titles, by approaching my suppliers and landlords without permission." Alina finally broke down, tears streaming down her face as she realized the social consequences of their exposed manipulation. "We just wanted to be included," she sobbed. "You were so successful and we felt left out. We thought if we showed that we were contributing, you'd make it official." "Contributing what?" I asked, my voice now loud enough for everyone in the room to hear clearly. "Carlos hasn't worked at any of my restaurants. Alina has never been involved in operations, marketing, or management. None of you have invested money, time, or expertise in building my businesses." Rosa, who had been silent during this confrontation, finally spoke up, her voice weak and confused. "Mija, I don't understand. Carlos said you were planning to make him a partner. He said the family would all benefit from your success." "Carlos lied to you, Rosa," I said gently but firmly. "Just like he's been lying to everyone else about his role in my businesses. I built these restaurants independently because I learned early that family loyalty doesn't guarantee business integrity." The reference to Carlos's earlier theft from Rosa's taqueria wasn't lost on the older family members who remembered that incident. Several heads nodded in recognition, and I could see understanding dawning in their expressions. My mother made one final attempt to salvage the situation. "Even if there were misunderstandings about official roles," she said desperately, "surely you can recognize the family's moral right to benefit from your success. We taught you our recipes, our values, our work ethic. And I've honored those teachings by building successful businesses that employ dozens of people and contribute to our community," I replied. "But moral rights don't translate to ownership claims or business authority. My success doesn't become communal property just because we share DNA." The room erupted into heated discussions as family members took sides and processed the implications of what they had witnessed. Some defended Carlos and Alina, arguing that family should share success. Others expressed outrage at the deception and manipulation. Rosa sat quietly, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her. Uncle Roberto, who had always been the family peacemaker, stood to address the room. "I think we all need to step back and recognize what's really happened here," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his 68 years. "Carlos and Alina made serious mistakes by misrepresenting their roles in Jessica's business, but this family gathering isn't the place to resolve business disputes." "It's exactly the place," I countered, "because they've been using family gatherings and family relationships to perpetuate these misrepresentations. Everyone here needs to understand that any future claims about family involvement in my businesses are false." Carlos made one last desperate attempt to maintain some credibility. "You can't just cut out your family," he declared, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're your blood, your foundation. Without us, you're nothing." The statement was so revealing of his fundamental misunderstanding that several family members actually gasped. My cousin Maria, the teacher, stood up from her table with obvious disgust. "Carlos, that's exactly the kind of thinking that got you into this mess," she said sharply. "Jessica built something amazing through her own work and talent. She doesn't owe any of us a piece of her success just because we're related." Her support emboldened other family members who had been uncomfortable with Carlos and Alina's behavior but hadn't known how to address it. Cousin David, the accountant, added his professional perspective. "From a business standpoint," he explained to the room, "what Carlos and Alina did could have serious legal consequences. Misrepresenting ownership and authority is fraud, regardless of family relationships." The weight of that statement settled over the gathering like a heavy blanket. Rosa finally spoke again, her voice trembling with emotion and age. Jessica Mija, I'm sorry, she said, her words barely audible above the background conversations. I didn't know Carlos was lying about the business partnership. I hoped, that the family could work together like in the old days. I walked over to Rosa's chair and knelt beside her, taking her weathered hands in mine. Rosa, I love you and I respect everything you built with your restaurant, but I learned from watching your struggles that family business can become family burden if the boundaries aren't clear. Standing back up, I addressed the entire room for my final statement. I want everyone here to understand my position clearly. I am proud of my Mexican heritage and grateful for the family recipes and traditions that inspired my restaurants. But my businesses are not family businesses, and they never will be. Any future claims of partnership, ownership, or authority from family members will be addressed through legal channels. The community center fell silent except for the hum of the overhead fans and the distant sound of children playing outside. I gathered my documents, placed them back in the portfolio, and walked toward the exit, pausing at the door to deliver my final words. I hope someday this family can celebrate each other's individual achievements without feeling entitled to control or profit from them. When that day comes, I'll be happy to attend family gatherings again. As I stepped out into the afternoon sunshine, I could hear the explosion of conversations that erupted behind me. Some voices were angry, others supportive, but all were processing the reality that their assumptions about family privilege and business ownership had been fundamentally challenged. The immediate aftermath of Rosa's birthday party was both liberating and isolating. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from family members taking various sides in the conflict. Some supported my position and apologized for not recognizing the extent of Carlos and Alina's misrepresentations. Others accused me of being ungrateful and destroying family unity over petty business details. My cousin Maria called that evening to express her support. I'm proud of you for standing up to them, she said firmly. Carlos has been getting away with manipulation for years because everyone was afraid to call him out. Alina, too, they needed to hear the truth. Uncle Roberto, however, left a voicemail expressing disappointment in how I had handled the situation. Mija, you were right about the business issues, but did you have to humiliate them in front of the whole family? There had to be a better way to resolve this privately. Over the following week, I learned more about the extent of Carlos and Alina's deception. 3 relatives contacted me to report that Carlos had approached them about investing in what he claimed was a family restaurant expansion. 2 neighborhood business owners mentioned that Alina had tried to negotiate supplier contracts on behalf of the Martinez Restaurant Group. Most concerning, my bank called to report that someone had attempted to access my business accounts using falsified partnership documents. Working with my attorney, I sent cease and desist letters to Carlos and Alina, formally demanding that they stop misrepresenting their relationship to my businesses and threatening legal action if the behavior continued. I also notified all my suppliers, landlords, and business contacts about the attempted fraud, clarifying that only I had authority to make decisions or enter into agreements. The legal documentation process revealed the full scope of what could have happened if I hadn't confronted the situation. Carlos had been developing a detailed business plan for restaurant expansion using my financial information and customer data. Alina had created marketing materials that positioned her as a co-founder of Martinez Modern Mexican. They had apparently believed that their family status would eventually force me to legitimize their claims. Professional counseling helped me process the emotional complexity of protecting my business from family members I had once trusted. Dr. Patricia Reeves, who specialized in family business conflicts, explained that my situation was more common than I had realized. Family businesses often struggle with boundary issues, she told me during one of our sessions. But in your case, the family created a fictional business relationship and then tried to make it real through manipulation and social pressure. Your response was appropriate and necessary. The therapy sessions also helped me understand the psychological patterns that had enabled this situation. Carlos and Alina had been conditioned by years of family favoritism to believe that success within the family should be shared, regardless of individual effort or contribution. They genuinely couldn't understand why my independent success wasn't available for their benefit. 3 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected call from Rosa. Her voice was weak and hesitant, but she asked if I would visit her at the taqueria during a quiet afternoon. When I arrived, I found her sitting alone at a corner table, looking smaller and more fragile than she had at the birthday party. Mija, I need to apologize, she said without preamble. I've been thinking about what happened at my party, and I realized that I failed you as your grandmother. I always favored Carlos because I thought boys needed more support in business. I didn't see your strength and intelligence until it was too late. Her admission was both painful and healing. We talked for over an hour about family expectations, gender roles, and the pressure that comes with being the responsible child in a dysfunctional family system. Rosa also revealed that Carlos had been stealing from the taqueria's register again, forcing her to remove him from daily operations. I should have listened to you when you tried to tell me about his problems years ago, she said sadly. I thought I was protecting him, but I was just enabling his bad choices. 6 months after the birthday party confrontation, my business relationships had stabilized and my family relationships had settled into a new pattern. Carlos had found work at a restaurant across town and was reportedly attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Alina had moved to San Diego with her boyfriend, posting occasional social media updates about her new life but avoiding any references to restaurant businesses. My parents maintained minimal contact, sending obligatory holiday greetings but avoiding deeper conversation about the business or family dynamics. Several extended family members had become closer to me, appreciating my honesty and the clarity I had brought to a confusing situation. Most importantly, my restaurants continued to thrive. Without the distraction and stress of family interference, I was able to focus entirely on operations, staff development, and community partnerships. I opened a fifth location and launched a catering division that served local schools and nonprofits at reduced rates. The employee profit sharing program I implemented used some of the money I had previously been giving to family members for their various emergencies. My staff appreciated the tangible recognition of their contributions, and several longtime employees were able to make down payments on homes or fund their children's education with their profit-sharing bonuses. 1 year after Rose's birthday party, I received a letter from Alina. She had enrolled in culinary school and was working part-time at a restaurant in San Diego, learning the business from the ground up rather than trying to claim unearned authority. Her letter included a genuine apology for the misrepresentations and an acknowledgement that she had been wrong to expect ownership without investment. I understand now why you protected your business so fiercely, she wrote. Building something real requires sacrifice and risk that I wasn't willing to take. I hope someday I can create my own success instead of trying to claim someone else's. Carlos had not reached out directly, but Rosa mentioned during one of our monthly coffee meetings that he was doing better. He had completed a business management course and was talking about opening a small lunch truck rather than trying to claim authority in existing family businesses. My relationship with Rosa had become the strongest and most honest it had ever been. She visited my restaurants regularly, offering cooking advice and enjoying the respect my staff showed her as the inspiration for our traditional recipes. She also began telling customers the true story of how I had built the business independently, taking pride in my achievements rather than trying to claim credit for them. The legal protections I had put in place proved their worth when a business magazine wanted to write a feature about successful family restaurant operations. The reporter initially planned to interview Carlos and Alina as business partners, but my documentation quickly corrected that misconception and resulted in an accurate article about individual entrepreneurship within family traditions. Currently, Martinez Modern Mexican employs 87 people across 5 locations and generates enough revenue to support not only my comfortable lifestyle, but also a foundation that provides small business loans to other young entrepreneurs from immigrant families. The success is entirely my own, but it's used to benefit my community in ways that honor the values Rosa taught me without compromising the boundaries that protect my business. The confrontation at Rosa's birthday party was the most difficult conversation I had ever had with my family, but it was also the most necessary. By clearly establishing the reality of business ownership and rejecting family claims of entitlement, I protected not only my financial interests but also my professional integrity and personal autonomy. Looking back, I realized that the earlier signs of family exploitation had been visible for months before I took action. Carlos's false business cards, Alina's social media misrepresentations, and my parents' inappropriate inquiries about business operations were all indicators that boundaries needed to be established and enforced. The most valuable lesson I learned from this experience is that business success creates responsibility not only to employees and customers, but also to the integrity of the enterprise itself. Allowing family members to claim unearned authority or ownership would have compromised everything I had worked to build and would have been unfair to the people who had actually contributed to that success. Family loyalty is important, but it cannot supersede business ethics, legal requirements, or personal autonomy. True family support means respecting individual achievements and boundaries, not expecting to benefit from someone else's success without contributing equivalent effort or investment. If you're facing similar pressure from family members who feel entitled to your business success, remember that you have the right to protect what you've built. Document any misrepresentations, clarify ownership and authority structures, and don't hesitate to seek legal advice if family members cross professional boundaries. Setting these boundaries may be uncomfortable in the short term, but it's essential for long-term business sustainability and family relationship health. Success that comes from your effort and investment belongs to you, and you have both the right and the responsibility to protect it from those who would exploit family relationships for personal gain. Have you experienced family members who felt entitled to benefit from your professional success? How did you handle pressure to share ownership or authority with relatives who hadn't contributed to building your business? What advice would you give to someone struggling to establish boundaries between family relationships and business operations? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story of protecting business legacy from family exploitation resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more content about navigating the complex intersection of family and professional success. Remember, you have the right to be proud of what you've built and the responsibility to protect it for the people who actually depend on your business for their livelihoods.